So I get a lot of questions from other dentists that I know are trying to use Omnichroma and Omnichroma blocker, and they've asked me about when to use the blocker and how much of it do you use in those cases. And it took me a little bit of time on my own experimenting with my own patients, experimenting on extracted teeth to figure out just how much to use. And so here's been my experience. So in the cases of a really small incisor that's been chipped, like 1 millimeter chip or less, the patient doesn't want to smooth the adjacent teeth down and you just need to build it up that little bit. If you use just straight Omnichroma, then it might look a little translucent up at the tip. So you have to use just a little tiny bit of the blocker on that to hide some of that translucent effect. And that would go on the palatal side of that layering. So you just add a little tiny bit of the blocker, leaving room to put the Omnichroma across that facial incisal aspect and feather it up onto the facial surface a little bit, and it works perfect every time. On a large class 3 that goes all the way through, some of those can get pretty huge. It's the same principle as with a fractured incisor, like a class 4. It's just on the side of the tooth rather than on the tip. You're going to get the same effects with the light coming through, the shadows from the mouth. So you start with kind of a thinner layer of blocker, look at it, see where you're at, and then you can build it from there. The trickier thing on a class 3, however, is usually you have this concavity that's deeper than what the cavo surface margin is of the tooth preparation. And so I will usually fill that whole internal part of the preparation with the blocker up to the cavo surface margin. So it's kind of hiding, so I'm not building it out yet. And then when I get that part cured, then I'll build out just a little bit more of the blocker to see where I'm at. So in those cases where you're doing a large class 3, I can then build out a little lingual shelf up to the contact point with the blocker, and I can see how much that effect is having, and if I need to add a little bit more, I can. And then the final layer would then just be the Omnichroma. And I always feather those onto the facial a little bit. I put a pretty decent 45-degree bevel across that cavo surface margin, and then it's just an infinity feather onto the rest of the tooth structure. So that's how I get things to seamlessly blend and come across. Other applications for the blocker, when you're doing a posterior tooth, removing an old amalgam or a large cavity that just has a really deep, dark secondary and tertiary dentin, reactionary dentin that just makes the tooth really dark, then I'll use the blocker on the base, and I just keep adding a little bit until I can tell that the color's gone. I won't bring the blocker all the way up to the cavo surface margin because that'll just make the restoration look opaque, although that's not as aesthetically sensitive in the back. But if you're going for really good aesthetics on those, then you just need enough to cover the darkness. So start more conservative, cure it, see what it looks like. If you need to add a little bit more, do a little bit and cure it, rather than just doing a big blob. And then if you overdo it, you got to cut it back, start the whole bonding process over. So just be smart about it. And then on occasion, I will use the blocker on large class 5 restorations where the patient has a lot of erosion. And again, you get that reactionary dentin that's just really dark brown or just stained. And if you were to use just straight Omnichroma on that, then that's going to show through the final restoration. So same principles, I'll just put a little bit of blocker on, cure it, see how it looks, add a little bit more if I need to. Once that color's gone, then you just add the Omnichroma and it just is perfect. So again, the keys are not overdoing the blocker, getting a nice long infinity bevel to feather this material into, and then when you polish it back and smooth it together, those margins just become absolutely imperceptible, even under the highest magnification. Patients love it, I love it, everything's just good about it. So it's a wonderful material to work with.